For Indonesian market, we were going from either nothing to seniors living, and we thought the idea of having these seniors clubhouses operating Monday to Friday, where elderly people can come, gather, meet, make friends in a mentally and physically stimulating environment, we thought that was kind of the appropriate bridge before entering the seniors living markets. For Indonesian market, we were going from either nothing to seniors living, and we thought the idea of having these seniors clubhouses operating Monday to Friday, where elderly people can come, gather, meet, make friends in a mentally and physically stimulating environment, we thought that was kind of the appropriate bridge before entering the seniors living markets. For Indonesian market, we were going from either nothing to seniors living, and we thought the idea of having these seniors clubhouses operating Monday to Friday, where elderly people can come, gather, meet, make friends in a mentally and physically stimulating environment, we thought that was kind of the appropriate bridge before entering the seniors living markets.
including assistive technologies. So again, aged care is trying to capture a whole range of sectors that when we think about trade and investment are part of that narrative. Next slide. So let's quickly cover where the Indonesian market for aged care is at, and we'll quickly talk about Australia's as well. And many in the audience will know these markets intimately, but we know the Indonesian experience of significant demographic shifts. By 2040, population above 65 is projected to double and will account for about 12% of the total population. At the moment, it's around 25 million people who would be considered older Indonesians. That's the Australian population, so it's a huge market. What we need to be very mindful that Indonesia's aged care market is very different from Australia's and actually a very different stage of need. Most aged care is currently provided by unpaid family caregivers. So when we talk about trade and investment in aged care and the emerging aged care market in Indonesia, we're conscious that this is a changing market that will emerge in the long term, but we're also seeing immediate need and opportunity now. And again, our speakers will talk about how they're tapping into that and how it's growing. While there is some formal aged care services being offered, the availability, their affordability, their accessibility and the quality is extremely uneven across the country, and the coordination is lacking. And as we'll talk about from the Australian markets, that stage of development of the aged care market provides lots of opportunities and challenges that potentially Australia and Indonesia can explore together. We know that the government of Indonesia, they're prioritising home care, which is a really interesting way to start out thinking and talking about the aged care market, because in fact, when we talk about Australia, where it has far more residential facilities as being a traditional delivery model for the aged care market, it's shifting to where Indonesia is thinking, and that is very much in the home care market. Let's go to the next slide. Having said that and talked about a little bit around the type and nature of aged care that currently exists in Indonesia, and we'll hear a lot more about that, there are a range of emerging market opportunities in the aged care sector in Indonesia. Here's just 3 examples, and some of the leaders from these firms and businesses will speak to us today that show that the aged care market in Indonesia is changing, is emerging, and is fascinating. They've got new ways that they're actually trying to deliver services to older Indonesians with 24/7 individualised care, promoting individual living and well-being, such as in Hovi care. And already it's got residents that are both local Indonesians and expatriates. So we're seeing the model is tapping into a bilateral nature as well. Living Well Seniors, we have a speaker from today who's going to be fascinating to hear from, is really about senior living communities in Jakarta. And they're trying to get meeting places for seniors. Again, a really different and unusual, interesting way to improve well-being for seniors and also supports aging Indonesians with new ways to engage in their community. It's already co-funded and run by Indonesian and Australian leadership team. So again, we're seeing how Australians and Indonesians are already working in this aged care sector in particular niche markets. And I think we'll hear more about just where they see the growth into the future. Love Care, another fascinating digital platform, which is where a lot of aged care innovation is going to come from, and already offering in-home care services on-demand access, which is meeting growing demand in Indonesia. So let's see how some of that kind of experience of the Indonesian market, if we go to the next slide, aligns with where Australia is at. Because as I said, it is a really different market, if only in terms of the scale of older Australians compared to older Indonesians. But what is similar is that, again, we have a rapidly increasing demand for aged care, assisted living and healthcare services, and an ageing population. Australians over the age of 60 are expected to double in the next 40 years, and those over 80 will actually triple, and that will account for 26% of the population, which is a huge share of the Australian population. What is really interesting is that that is happening at the same time as the first older Australians are a generation with significant savings. Australia's superannuation policies mean that we have what is being called the silver economy, which is a group of increasingly affluent older Australians in retirement. That means that it's a market with huge demands for different goods and services to support retirement. Aged care service at the same time is really shifting in Australia towards a high quality continuum of care. And I should flag, Australia's just had a serious Royal Commission into aged care that really provides a new outlook, a new way and huge reform agenda for aged care in Australia that presents significant challenges, but also significant opportunities for where the aged care market can significantly improve. So part of that shift, there's a real shift from residential aged care facilities to in-home care. And I mentioned earlier how a lot of Indonesia's care is already in the home, often by unpaid carers. But in Australia, we're seeing a shift into in-home care, typically with a paid workforce. And that presents huge opportunities with a doubling of expected in-home care residents in the next 2 decades. With that in-home care is coming in expectation of a significant increase in the quality and type of services that are provided at home. Again, huge market opportunity for different kind of supports and services. At the same time, as Australia faces in many sectors, there's a huge workforce shortage and a major challenge with an expectation of over 110,000 aged care worker shortages by 2030, which is not too far off. So we'll go to the next slide. Within that aged care market in Australia, there's also huge innovations with those changes that we're seeing that really do resonate with some of the alignment with the needs and growth in the Indonesian market. For instance, there's innovations in the provision of in-home care, such as smart home systems using sensors, monitoring devices, robotics, all enabling the elderly to continue to exist in a quality way, both in the home and in residential aged care. We've got things like a virtual emergency department program that's being developed to allow patients in residential aged care to be diagnosed, treated and monitored in place. So it reduces both the cost and distress of having to be transported to hospital. Again, the kind of technologies we can see being readily used in the Indonesian market and also being advanced and developed in different ways in Indonesia. We'll go to the next slide. So what could bilateral trade in aged care really look like? Well, that's a question for our panellists, but we have a few ideas that we just wanted to plant the seed and test with everyone around what the opportunities could look like. So we'll go to the next slide. There's any number of areas we think that bilateral trade and investment opportunities could exist, but some in particular, which Catalyst has done some extensive work on around technology solutions for aged care, digital health solutions and telemedicine. We know this is important across the entire healthcare sector, but in particular, there's real advances being made in aged care services and digital health, including in assistive technology and devices. Catalyst has an entire report on this sector that really does show the huge potential market for assistive technologies, both being developed and delivered and manufactured between Australia and Indonesia. And there's a real supply chain opportunity to work together in that space. There's opportunities, we know with aging, certain health conditions, dementia, other chronic diseases, there's opportunities to work together on treatments that can actually reduce the overall costs and experience of chronic diseases as people age. There's opportunities for premium aged care services, and in particular, I mentioned IA-CEPA allows for major investment, up to 67% in Indonesian firms for aged care facilities. That could be an opportunity for Australian investors, as well as both Australian and Indonesian investors in aged care health and wellness tourism, which is something, again, Catalyst is exploring, starting in Bali, but with opportunities across the country. We'll go to the next slide. A few more areas that we can see real opportunities: workforce training and education. Catalyst is exploring a range of areas where there are real workforce training and education and skilling opportunities across many sectors, but aged care is one that there's a mutually beneficial workforce training model that can be imagined. In fact, Catalyst is already working on micro-credentials in the care economy, so watch this space. Standards and quality assurance, again, often in typical traditional development programs, we're often trying to share the policy environment, the landscape, harmonise standards to try and improve the performance of markets. And again, there's real opportunities in aged care to learn lessons of what has worked in an evolving aged care market in Australia and in Indonesia, and share ways to actually improve the quality of the provision of aged care. There's infrastructure opportunities, which Catalyst is always keen to explore and support around expanding aged care facilities, whether that's in communities or more traditional facilities, but even in the management of services, there's opportunities to explore bilateral trade and investment. And finally, that huge innovation that is happening in both countries in in-home care models, systems and support could be an area where lessons can be shared, investments could be bilateral and mutually beneficial. So there's the seeds of some ideas. We see huge opportunities for investment in this aged care sector over the short, medium and longer term. And let's discuss how that is playing out today with some of the leaders in the sector. So I'll revert back to Riyandi for our next session.
So thank you very much, Amanda, for that. Thank you, Amanda, for that insightful presentation. As Amanda pointed out, investment regime is relatively open for this sector, right? 67%. That means commercial opportunity for private sector is also ample, as government still prioritizing in the home care and community-based service. So that means private sector can tap more into like more fully serviced residential care home or nursing home, and etc. And traditionally, as Amanda pointed out as well, trade in aged care. Sorry, my camera suddenly fall off. So traditionally, the trade in the sector takes form of foreign direct investment or MO3, but as Amanda also said, there is a recent advances in the technology, so that allows for telemedicine. And of course, there is still this open opportunity for bringing in expertise to contribute in the aged care market in both countries. So the bottom line is the opportunities is ample in the sector. So let's hear directly from the practitioners in the field. So without further ado, let's get into our first panel session, focusing on aged care opportunities in Indonesia. So our first two speakers will give a short 5-minute presentation on who they are, their operation, and their thoughts on aged care in Indonesia. And then Amanda and I will put some question to the speaker to answer. To start off this session, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Ben Cass, who is the President Director of Living Well Seniors Communities and the co-founder of Asosiasi Senior Living Indonesia. For over 15 years, Ben has led a team of developers and operators and has project managed numerous residential and mixed-use projects with a strong focus on seniors living in Asia. Ben is chair of the Retirement and Senior Living Southeast Asia Annual Conference and is a frequent speaker throughout the region on this very topic. Ben served on the Australia-Indonesia Business Council's Victorian Committee, and yes, he's an Aussie. I should say that Ben also recently appeared on the Catalyst podcast, which you should check out, of course, after this today's session, right? So welcome, Ben. The Zoom is yours.
Riandi, thanks. Riandi, thanks for the intro. Amanda, thank you, and my appreciation to the team from Catalyst and Equity Economics that we've worked with over the last couple of months. And I do appreciate your sincere interest in this sector. I guess as a starting point, when asked, for a snapshot of seniors living here in Indonesia, I think the first point should be that we simply didn't need to have this discussion 10 or 20 years ago. If you accept life expectancy rates, even as recent as the year 2000, we're coming in at about 58, 59 years of age, the average life expectancy. So it therefore is logical that one wouldn't invest a lot of time and or resources from government into a sector if people aren't going to be there to enjoy it. The big change has been over that last 20 years, that starting from that point of 58, 59 years of age back in 2000, that's now increased up to about 72 years of age as of last year. So that now creates a whole demand for a whole new segment of the community, which previously had no services provided for it. Other than, and this goes to Amanda's point in the introduction, the informal care economy, which primarily meant women, and those familiar with Indonesia would be aware it primarily meant the role of pembantu, domestic nannies, who lacked the skills, training, and qualifications to adequately look after a senior. But that has really been the kind of staple of seniors care here, for as long as anyone can remember. But of course, Indonesia is changing. Those demographics which Amanda spoke about are changing. You have a rapid urbanization, which is akin to any country entering into the middle class ground. By virtue of urbanization, that also means much smaller living spaces. So by virtue of having smaller living spaces, the idea of 3 generations living under one happy roof is no longer viable when people are living in 50 square meter apartments throughout Jakarta and big cities like Surabaya. You have the workforce participation amongst women. There are now more college-educated women in Indonesia than men. That therefore then means who then now is available to take care of parents who ordinarily would have been taken care of, A, pembantu, and B, the daughter and or daughter-in-law in a family unit. So all that's just not viable anymore. And that's what gives rise to businesses like ours. Living Well Seniors Communities established itself as a PTPMA, a foreign-owned company domiciled in Australia, but undertaking operations here in Indonesia about 10 years ago. We were the first international company to receive a certification to undertake seniors living here in Indonesia. And in fact, we were the first company to actually even have it as a company line item. Again, those Indonesians and Australians familiar with company registration here in Indonesia would be familiar with the KBLI system. And I still remember when we were registering the company some 10, 11 years ago, having the discussions with government here, explaining that we weren't a hospital, explaining that we weren't a nursing home for abandoned seniors. There was just no concept as to what this industry looked like. Fast forward a little while, one of the first things we did to gain traction in this market was, having appreciated the absence of government's understanding of the sector, we formed an association called ASLI, Association of Seniors Living Indonesia, as Riandi introduced. Now, that was done in conjunction with 4 or 5 other operators and stakeholders in the care economy here in Indonesia. And that's been extremely important and chaired by another aged care operator, driving that discussion with government, and most especially changing the way older people are regarded in Indonesian society. So again, if you accept that the life expectancy back in the year 2000 was 58, 59 years of age, unfortunately, the mentality here in Indonesia is to be old, and that's being defined as late 50s, which is terrifying. To be old is therefore to be sick. To be old is therefore to be sick. And one of the mistakes with early entrance into this sector by other aged care operators was unfortunately adopting that template, that mentality of assuming old people are sick. Therefore, some of the initial seniors living projects were not a success because they were underpinned by this mentality. So that mentality looked like, in practice, an aged care facility which was designed by a hospital architect, staff which were recruited from a local hospital, staff uniforms which looked like they were all nurses, a very sanitized environment, which unfortunately terrified most Indonesians. So we almost took a step back some 10 or 15 years ago. And unfortunately, some operators are still making that mistake. They fall into that trap of assuming old people are sick. Therefore, we need doctors and stethoscopes and nurses running around and bright UV white lights. Our approach has been very different. We internally have our own motto, more hospitality, less hospital. The idea that this is a hospitality product. This is an opportunity for older people to enjoy their lives, not have it akin to a hospital bed and just waiting for the time to pass by. There was a comment earlier, I think, made by Amanda about funding for this sector. We are an entirely privately operated business. There are no government subsidies or government funding for the seniors care industry for private operators like ourselves. And that therefore means our target market here in Indonesia is quite deliberately a middle to middle upper demographic. I mean, numbers dictate that that's where we have to be for it to be a profitable company. In a city like Jakarta, which some of the listeners to this podcast would be aware, in a city like Jakarta, that middle to middle upper will generally congregate amongst some of the large townships. And there are a handful of township developers here in Jakarta, and they are the ones who appeal to that middle to middle upper demographic. And so our job has been explaining our services and aligning ourselves with those township developers, because we are the perfect fit for any modern township. A modern township will typically, of course, have residential offerings, will of course have commercial offerings, will of course have hospitals, schools, shops, and malls. But the missing piece up until a few years ago was facilities for seniors. Our relationship with the Ciputra Group started about 4 years ago. An innovative organization. The very DNA of the Ciputra Group has always been innovation. The founder, Pachi, was considered the founder of modern real estate here in Indonesia. And with the assistance of the Ciputra Group, we co-developed and now co-manage a seniors clubhouse in Citra Garden City in Jakarta's west. That opportunity for seniors together, Monday to Friday, we call it Sekolah untuk Orang Lansia, like a school for older people. But most importantly, it's an opportunity for them to meet. Jakarta is a tough city. It's a city where people very easily can feel isolated, and none more so than amongst seniors, given the lack of basic infrastructure. When we talk about things like lack of public transport or lack of footpaths, etc., that hurts seniors the most. So that was the opportunity to gather. But more recently, we've partnered with Agung Sedayu Group for one of their new projects in Pik Dua in Jakarta's north for both residential facilities and seniors clubhouse. But I guess going into 24, as a business, we are keen to pivot towards that foreign market in Bali. That's something we always shied away from for the last 10 years. Our focus has been on a domestic market. But the two big barriers in Bali to attract foreigners may, and there's a big caveat on this, but may have been lifted. And that's in the form of one, 5-year retirement visas, whereas previously there was only 1-year visas. And number two, the availability of an international hospital in Sanur. Now, international hospital doesn't simply mean adding it to your name. It means the availability of foreign doctors, and that hospital is currently under construction in Sanur, which then gives the opportunity for seniors living for foreigners now in Bali, which has had so many false starts over the years, but now that is viable, much like in Thailand. The third part of our business, if I can very briefly touch on it, something which we're looking at for 2024, is the availability of personal caregivers in Indonesia and connecting them to the Australian market. We are all aware of the massive deficit of aged care workers in Australia, and many of us may be aware that there's a oversupply of nursing and medical staff here in Indonesia, and that seems to be a perfect fit, availing that surplus here in Indonesia and putting it towards the Australian market to deal with that massive shortage that the Australian aged care sector is now facing.
Thank you, Ben. I mean, that's fascinating to hear about, and I'm keen to hear more. I particularly love that idea of more hospitality, less hospital. I think you've mentioned it in the context of Indonesia, but I think even the Australian aged care sector is grappling with that. So yeah, definitely keen to come back to you, Ben, with some hard-hitting questions to hear more about what you're doing in Jakarta, which sounds fantastic. But firstly, it's now my pleasure to introduce our second speaker for this panel, Ibu Susan Neo, who's the Chief Executive Officer and Chief Technology Officer and founder of LoveCare. LoveCare is an online platform that matches care and domestic workers to households in urban areas of Indonesia. It also provides domestic and care workers with access to training as needed. LoveCare is a majority female run, and its senior management is 75% female. LoveCare has been recognised internationally, including in 2023, winning the She Loves Tech Awards in Indonesia, and in 2021, LoveCare was one of the winners of the UN Women Care Accelerator Program. Ibu Susan has presented internationally, including in Australia on LoveCare's operations and advocating for more investment in care services. But unfortunately, Ibu Susan's had to advise that she's had a conflicting travel schedule, and so she's had to record her presentation. So let's go to that now and hear from Ibu Susan.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today to share about LoveCare. I apologize for not being able to join you live as I am currently in flight. I regret missing the interaction during webinar, but please know I am eager to connect and answer any questions or insights. Just send me an email. Okay, now before we dive deeper about LoveCare, I would like to clear the air. I know the name Love Care has that romantic ring to it, but I assure you, Love Care is not a dating app. We specialize in a very different kind of matchmaking, connecting people with the care they need, from childcare and elder care to specialized medical support. Why we started this? Finding good care is tough and time consuming, and it is usually the women who end up caring for free, leaving families in need of better options. At Love Care, we really get how important it is for people to receive care in their own home, where they are most at ease. We notice that in lots of places, not just in Indonesia, people really don't like the idea of sending their loved one away to get care. It sort of feels like we are not really taking good care of them, and nobody wants to feel that way. It's a growing problem today with 30 million kids under 7 and 32 million elderly people over 60. That's a lot of people needing care, more than the entire population of some countries. But here's the thing, old school care just isn't going to cut it for such a big group. We need to think bigger and smarter. So we thought, why not make it super easy for families to find the help they need without leaving the house? Whether it's a bit of help for a few hours, someone to keep grandma company, a therapist to help someone get better, someone energetic to play with the kids, or a nurse for more serious care. Our app quickly finds the right person for the job. Plus, this approach is win-win because care workers get to work in a way that suits them best. They can choose jobs that match what they are good at and when they are free to work, from short visits to longer care tasks. This flexibility means we can offer help to more people, wherever they are, not just to those who can get to certain place for care. Essentially, our customers are anyone in need of personalized care services, whether it's parents with young children, adult children caring for elderly parents, or anyone in between needing specialist care services. Love Care connects them with the ideal caregiver to meet their unique requirement. And turns out our innovative solution received positive responses not just from customers, but also caregivers, medias, and also we receive recognition from both local and international bodies. But most importantly, our app works. Using just our app and within a short time, we have facilitated thousands of visits across 36 cities of Indonesia, including remote areas like Papua. That's why even though we are originating in Indonesia, we envision a future where our app bridges care needs across borders, connecting people not just locally, but internationally. Speaking of what sets Love Care apart, our base in Indonesia is not just a location, but a strategic advantage. Over 60% of the country's population is of productive age, and our strong connections with nursing schools across the region enable us to supply care workers both locally and internationally. This is particularly significant for countries grappling with an aging population and a shortage of workers in non-productive age group. Moreover, at Love Care, we understand that traditional caregiving methods fall short in addressing the needs of a growing demographic requiring care. It's clear that to meet the extensive needs of those requiring care, a modern approach backed by technology is essential. So, what's the big opportunity for care in Indonesia? It's all about getting creative with technology and working together to make sure care is something everyone can count on today and tomorrow. That's what we are all about at Love Care, and we are pumped to see where we can take this. Our commitment to integrating proper systems and cutting edge technology ensures that the quality of care we deliver is both scalable and sustainable. Using tech means we can keep an eye on health condition in real time, chat instantly if families have questions, and even get doctor's advice without leaving the house. It's like having a future where care comes to you, no matter where you are. We are excited about the potential this presents, not just for Love Care, but for the broader ecosystem of care. In conclusion, our mission at Love Care is clear: to offer diverse care options that cater to everyone's needs, be it home-based or institutional care. We are dedicated to finding the best fit for each individual. And additionally, Love Care is open to collaboration as we believe partnerships can enhance our mission. Should you have any question or require further information, please do not hesitate to drop me an email. I am here to help. I hope you enjoy today's session and have a nice day ahead. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ibu Susan. Even though Ibu Susan is not here, it's very encouraging to see that technology is actually being used to fulfill the market demand in aged care. So it's very encouraging. And for those of you that also interested, as me, prepare your question through Slido and through the chat. And we are now moving on our panel question session. But since Ibu Susan is not here, we will only direct our panel question to Ben. So my first question will be from me. Your organization focus on changing the way the Indonesian market views aging and aged care service provision. Can you share with us a little bit more the lesson learned from this experience, Ben? Especially what are the challenges that you faced so far, whether it's the regulatory or human capital or etc. And how do you foresee the aged care market opportunities in Indonesia in the not so distant future?
The presentation by Lovecare just I think illustrated that this market, just like in more mature markets, has different providers who will be offering different types of services. So the home care model is an appealing one. The home care market is a cost-effective one in compared to the costs and the operation involved with aged care facilities. But of course, what it doesn't provide for is that sense of community. And that's particularly necessary in a big city like Jakarta. It cannot be underlined enough just how isolating a big city like Jakarta can be and with no stretch of the imagination or exaggeration, when you cannot, for many people, cannot go beyond their front door, beyond their own front homes, without the use of some sort of mechanized transport, in the absence of any footpaths, having to traverse across a broken road and navigate that with a series of motorbikes and cars and whatnot. That's reasonably okay for someone at my age. That's of course horrible for an elderly person. So what it means is it drives people inwards and it isolates them. And one of the things we've tried to do is create that sense of community again, bringing people together, creating new friendships where they can then learn their own skills, make new friends, and really genuinely have a new lease on life. One of the things which, and some of the Indonesians on this call would be aware, just in the last couple of weeks, we saw went viral, one of the largest F&B retailers here in Indonesia, Boga Group, advertising for new positions. Now, that in itself is not newsworthy, but what was newsworthy was the fact that they were only recruiting people who were 60 plus. Now, I've just never seen that before. And I think there is a growing awareness by baby boomers as they enter into that so-called elderly age, that they do not want to have the same life that their parents did. And for us as a business, COVID was the eye-opener for so many people. I mean, we received the most inquiries about our services during COVID. Because dare I say it, for a busy family unit where husband and wife are at work, children are going to school, it was only during COVID where so many families actually saw how their parents actually live. Sitting there, bored, alone, with a domestic helper, occasionally wheeled out to the sun for 10 minutes, and then back to be placed in front of a TV for the next 5 to 6 hours, with no exaggeration. So I think so many of that baby boomer generation now realizes that's not the life that we want. So that goes to my earlier presentation, that kind of shift which is happening, both in terms of a demographic shift, which Amanda spoke of, but also now in terms of that shift in mentality as people's needs change and people's own requirements as they get older is starting to change.
Thanks, Ben. I mean, I think you're really tapping into the idea of why the care economy matters. And it's not just about the care economy being a big part of the economic activity, a big employer, a big potential growth market, but also that if we do it well, if you improve the quality of care, you can actually increase economic participation by elder Australians and improve development outcomes if we're talking about childcare. So this is why it's seen in the kind of economics world as this win-win policy area for investment. But
No,
Ben,
if I can
sorry,
just jump in there. Sorry, man. If I can just jump in again, when we talk about unskilled carers, one of the great achievements of ASLI, Associated Seniors Living Indonesia, and I don't want to pretend I was a driver behind this. I'm proudly a co-founder, but it was done by other members of the team, have been able to achieve recognition of personal care attendance as an actual skill now here in Indonesia. And that was never done before. So again, this recognition that it's just not enough to have unskilled, untrained workers who are, placed into a family household to then care for seniors. It needs much more sophistication and much more skill than what's been done in the past.
It's a great lead into my next question to you, Ben, is really where are those opportunities that you see for collaboration with Australia? And in particular, I understand your organisation is talking about a collaboration in skilling and training. What opportunities do you see for working with Australia in the aged care market?
As I touched on during the presentation, there is this, we have kind of stumbled into this third part of our business by almost by accident. On the sidelines of the G20 meetings here about a year and a half ago, we received a group from Tasmania who were talking about the aged care crisis. Now, all of us as Australians, we hear that term all the time, and all of us are wrestling with actually how to deal with it. Nothing can change the fact there are simply more older people than there are people to support those older people. Nothing can change that. So where Indonesia provides the opportunity, and I think the last speaker made this point also, is we have a surplus here in Indonesia of skilled caregivers. Now, whether you want to call them diploma, bachelor nurses, whether they are personal care attendants who have recently been certified under the new government regulations, whatever it is, there is a pool of talent here in Indonesia which can be applied to the Australian sector. The exciting thing has been the changes by the Australian government by about a year and a half ago. Again, some of the experts on this panel probably know it better than I do, but for the first time, it really gave a meaningful way of personal care attendants from outside of Australia to enter the Australian market. And that was in the form of a 2-year work visa with then a pathway to permanent residency. In conjunction with trade unions back in Australia, in conjunction with, I think it's the United Workers Union and the nurses and midwifery unions in Australia, to ensure that there is that quality standard and that overseas staff are being paid appropriately according to Australian standards. But that now opens up a huge opportunity. And for us, our job over the next few months will be connecting personal care attendants from Indonesia and introducing them to Australian aged care operators. And I think in some small way, there'll be a real contribution from Indonesia to the Australian aged care sector.
Thanks again, Ben, for that. We've got a heap more questions for you, but for now, we might take a quick break and we'll be back for the second panel. Oh, I did say it would be quick. There's no bathroom breaks. There's no time for bathroom breaks in this webinar. Our second panel is actually focused on aged care opportunities in and for Australians and potential collaborations with Indonesia. And so we've got 2 more speakers lined up for you today. And I'm really pleased to be able to introduce to you the first of those speakers in the session, which is Toby Hall, who I actually used to work with Toby. I don't know if you recall, but many years ago at Mission Australia, you were my boss, which was a wonderful time. Toby is currently the chair of the For-Purpose Aged Care Australia, which runs and operates aged care services in Australia. He's also strategic advisor to For-Purpose Investment Partners, which is focused on attracting impact investors to bring private sector capital and capabilities to aged care and other care economy sectors. So really fascinating other area for expansion in the care economy in terms of private sector capital. Toby has a lot of relevant experience as a leader in many aspects of the care economy in Australia. Toby is an experienced not-for-profit and healthcare executive, including 8 years as CEO of St Vincent's Health Australia, one of Australia's largest healthcare providers until February 2022. Prior to St Vincent's, Toby was CEO of Mission Australia for nearly a decade. And during his time at Mission, Toby oversaw the group's contribution to the formation of Good Start Early Learning, one of the largest childcare providers in Australia. And Toby's maintained involvement with Good Start through a seat on the board until 2014. Welcome, Toby. Really keen to hear your views. So over to you for your comments.
Thanks, Amanda, and great to be with you today. And thanks to the team from Catalyst as well for having us here. Aged care, to me and to our team, is about ensuring that there is freedom of choice for older Australians in terms of how they live while they age. And our strategy is to create an environment where people actually have choice about the end of their life rather than being forced into a situation that they maybe don't like or don't accept. And what that means for us is that we will focus on providing care environments which range from supported living through to palliative care as people age. And on that journey, we want to be able to make sure people understand that they have choice in where they live, how they live, who supports them. And we established effectively because we felt that choice wasn't necessarily available to a lot of Australians. In fact, there'd been a lot of scandals in the aged care industry in terms of the quality of care, the quality of facilities, and the kind of support that people had had. And so we wanted to address that. So we established an organisation to essentially deliver high quality care standards in high quality environments that would support both the care needs, but the living needs of people. And this comes back to Ben's earlier discussion that many people in aged care had this concept that aged care was like a beautiful lifestyle environment where people would play games, sit together, enjoy life, eat together, watch movies, and have a very wonderful end-of-life experience. And to some extent, that is part of aged care, but also part of aged care is acknowledging that many people need quite sophisticated health-based interventions as they age. And particularly in our environment, the majority of people come to us for the last 2 years of their life. Generally speaking, I'd love to say that our customers want to come to our aged care facilities, but 85% of people who come to our facilities are not coming to us as their first choice. And in fact, almost always the preferential choice is that people would prefer to age at home. And we fundamentally support that choice where it's possible. But the reality is for some people, from a health point of view, that isn't possible. There are issues to do with diseases of aging, like dementia, like Alzheimer's, where people actually need quite sophisticated care and support to be able to age safely. Then there's just general health problems that people have as they age where they're not capable of being able to stay at home sustainably. And to that end, we try and provide an environment which can support those people live as well as they can while still being supported. That means advocating for high quality staff to support people who are aging. And that means more and more people we expect and we hope will have qualifications to support the work they're doing in the aged care environment. There's already minimum standards in Australia for aged care as minimum quality standards, but our view is that those standards need to lift and aged care needs to be seen as a profession for professionals, not a place where someone can just go and walk in and start a job caring for people without very much experience or training. And our expectations over time, we would see most staff would have 2 years training to be able to work in the aged care space, to be able to deliver the sort of support that is needed in the aged environment. Our focus in terms of our work has been, we believe that the environment that people should age in should be beautiful, and should be something that, whether you're from a wealthy background or a more disadvantaged background, that should be equitable in terms of access. And so we're aiming to create environments which are aesthetically pleasing, that are safe and accessible to people from all backgrounds. In Australia, that's to an extent easy to do because of the funding structure which is in place. The funding largely for aged care is provided from two sources. One, it's personal wealth, and to date there's over $32 billion of personal wealth invested in the aged care space, where people pay deposits to be part of the aged care industry. But then the government annually is also providing $17 billion worth of support for people to be in the aged care environment. And the current government funding model is one which will allow, on an ongoing basis, the standard of care which we have today to be improved, and to allow high quality infrastructure to be provided to people in the aged care environment. So that's been our strategy and our focus. The question we have to step back and ask then is, what do people want from aged care? And the reality is, in the majority of cases, what people are seeking in aged care is actually safety. The reality is, for many of us, the situation is, well, how do we look after mum and dad well? How do we make sure they're cared for? How do we make sure they're not lonely? How do we make sure that they've got an environment they want to be part of? That's a question which will face many of us over the next decade or two. And we want to make sure that we've got an environment where people can have community, have a safe environment where they can live the most fulfilling, flourishing life they can whilst they're still safe. And that has been our focus. Our general view is that the Australian aged care market has not been good enough in terms of providing the sort of supports people need. The qualifications of staff has not been high enough, and we are aspiring to ensure that we have high quality staff and high quality environments to support people. To give some context of the demand for aged care and the demand for people who particularly can't age at home, currently about 70% of people who are in aged care are aged 85 plus. That population group in Australia is multiplying 4 times over the next 2 decades. And the reality is, for a large proportion of that group, as they age, at some point they will need to have higher levels of care than can be provided in home. And whilst we absolutely aspire and hope we can support services in home, there will always be a place where high quality support services are needed in residential environments. And we want to make sure that we give the ability to people to access those services. So that's what we're about. That's what we're doing. And we believe that the sector is one which is viable economically. In fact, it's a weird one to say it's an incredibly exciting business opportunity, but with the aging population, it's an incredible business opportunity. But it's also, I think, an opportunity to really add value to your society, whether you're in Indonesia or in Australia, in terms of ensuring that the care environments we provide are at an exceptionally high quality level, to ensure that the families we work with have got their parents being looked after how they would like. And that's what we aspire to do. Back to you, Amanda.
Thank you, Toby. It's really fascinating to hear about how aged care industry operates in Australia, and how the government of Australia has provided financial support for the development of aged care industry. The first time I came here in Australia as well, I really fascinated by the way the seniors has work in the supermarket, for example, is very fascinating for me to see that in person. So if you are that interested, as well as me, let's just prepare your question in the chat box and Slido, and we will explore more during Q&A session. But before that, let me introduce you to our second speaker for this session, which is Ibu Dewi Trisnawati, or Ibu Trisna, as she is more commonly known. Ibu Trisna is the Managing Director of Hoficare Bali. Hoficare has its roots in Finland, where the company operated their first nursing home for almost 30 years ago. Hoficare Bali offers assisted living and elderly care in Sabah Gianyar, integrated with Kasih Ibu Hospital Sabah. Hofi Assisted Sabah provides high-quality 24/7 care to promote independent living and well-being. Residents of the facility are mostly foreign nationals. We understand that there are even 2 Australians in the facility. Hoficare Bali also runs Hofi Club Tuku Umar in Marinda Park, Denpasar, a center of activities for active senior. So without further ado, over to you, Ibu Trisna. I think you're still muted, Bu.
Thank you for the introduction, Pak Riyandi. Hello, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to join this panelist. As been explained just now, shortly, I am the Managing Director of Hoficare Bali. It is from Finland. It has its roots in Finland. It is a franchise cooperation between Kasih Ibu Group Hospitals in Bali with Hoficare brand in Finland. So it was started 30 years ago, their first nursing home in Finland, and they have then expanded to Asia. It was started from Singapore. There are 2 Hofi clubs in Singapore at the moment, and then to Indonesia, which is Bali in particular. So Hoficare Bali have adopted the 2 concepts, which is Hofi Assisted and Hofi Club. So we have this facility. It is indeed integrated with Kasih Ibu Hospital in Sabah Gianyar, and the other is in Denpasar, located in a beautiful Marinda Park. So what we are here for is to promote the well-being for the elderly, seniors, and we have the 3 pillars in order to kind of translate it into our care. It's first of all is the physicality, and then the cognitive, as well as the social interaction or well-being. Currently for Hofi Assisted, I understand this now that I think it was from Ben mentioning about hospital and hospitality. It is indeed somehow in our facility in Sabah. Sometimes the family will ask, "Oh, it is in a hospital," but in a way, it is also something positive because with the age, there will be some issues on the health of our residents, and it will be very, promptly handled or taken care of by the team of the hospital. Now, our location is located on the top floor, on the 4th floor of the hospital, and we have our own rooftop garden. We have private rooms, and the residents here is taken care of by all certified nurses, caregivers. Currently, we have more foreign nationals or of residents. Let's say 90% of our residents in Hofi Assisted Sabah are from foreign nationals, and the rest is Indonesian. The other way around with our facility in Marinda Park, Hofi Club, because it is more for active seniors, we have lots of programs prepared for our members there. There is 90% actually joined by Indonesian national. So one of the things which is good to note is that this is pretty new, like assisted living, high quality facility for elderly. I can say this is the first kind of facility ever introduced in Bali island. A lot of time it's mistakenly with panti jompo or panti sosial, which is of course subsidized by the government, and I think at least there's room on and food, and there's not much of premium high quality of cares, and it is kind of free. I mean, of course, subsidized by the government, and most of the time the residents are those without family, kind of abandoned, and they don't have anybody to take care of them. So it is also sometimes it's difficult to communicate this with the market. Let's say the market, why they need to consider this kind of facility for their loved one or their family, because it's pretty new. So a lot of education that need to be done, a lot of communication need to be all the time done for the society, for the people, that this is a facility which is important if they want to really make sure that they want to give the best quality of life for their elderly or their loved ones. So at the moment, what we are doing is making sure that what we have here, which is the facility and the caregivers, on how to say that the top quality, making sure that the family know that they're giving their loved one in a very good hands. And we will continue to also making sure that more and more people are aware about this kind of facility, which is now available in Bali or Indonesia.
Thank you, Ibu Trisno. It's really interesting to hear you're at the forefront of that change in families needing to, their expectations of how they will care for older Indonesians. So it's really interesting to hear about that experience and how you're managing that transition. So now we have some questions for our panelists. First, I'll direct the question to Toby. Your business is also in impact investing, and we haven't really spoken about what that even looks like in aged care. So curious to hear, what is impact investing in aged care, and any lessons that you would be relevant to the audience that you might be able to share?
Yeah, impact investing is really looking at investments that are providing positive outcomes that society needs. And so the areas which you might look at for impact investing might be childcare, might be environmental renewable energy projects, it might be education support services, and it may be aged care. And so the organisation I work with really talks to major funders to say, how can we support social infrastructure which is needed for the future? So we always need childcare, we always need aged care. How do we get investors to actually get behind that? And so what we've got is a fund which allows major investment groups like Australian superannuation trusts, major fund managers, to have access to social infrastructure. And social infrastructure is fairly complex for them to understand in its own right. And so they really need organizations to deliver services for them. So we create an environment where we have a number of organizations that are running businesses in the social space, which they're able to fund. And it feels a kind of double purpose. One is to allow large-scale investment into the social infrastructure space, but secondly, a lot of organizations in Australia, particularly non-profit organizations, don't have access to equity markets. And impact investors are able to work with those organizations to create successful businesses. And to give some context in this space, in the childcare space, the largest provider in the childcare space is a non-profit organisation without access to equity. The second largest hospital group in Australia is a non-profit without access to equity, and there's a number of large aged care providers that also don't have access to equity. And so what we do is allow those organisations to match up with investors to deliver outcomes for social good. And that's essentially what impact investing is.
Thank you, Toby. Now I will have a question for Ibu Trisna. So, as we understand, Indonesia has a large aging population, thus a promising commercial opportunity in the aged care sector. Yet, the aged care industry is only emerging. What opportunities do you see to grow these aged care services in Indonesia? And perhaps learning from the case of Australia, as mentioned by Toby, do you see a case for a kind of a policy support from the government that might be needed to grow the industry even more in the future? Over to you, Ibu.
Yeah. One thing that I want to also, first of all, highlight is this has a lot to do with the culture in Indonesia or in Bali in particular. It's also mentioned earlier as well by other panelists that it is still in one household, 3 generations living together, and it's preferred that way. They're not living in an apartment in Bali, of course, as you know. People live in houses, and they have this socially kind of it's not obligation, but people will really look at you in a good way, in a positive way, when you are taking care of your old ones or elderly at home. So this is the stigma that still need to be somehow loosened a little bit. A lot of educations need to be done, because what is not yet being properly educated is also about the dementia. Older people tend to have this dementia. Older people need supposed to, well, the caregivers in the household, they need to be equipped with the understanding of how to take care of their loved one, and most of them, in the case of older people, is having dementia. So opportunities are many, but then here a lot of education need to take place first. And the government, for the moment, we know that there's no contribution whatsoever, or a lot of education done from their side, or policy. It's all the private sector who drive this industry, if you want to call it. So if you ask me about what would be the opportunities, is of course to have a good caregivers by maybe training center, and equip them with the knowledge about caregiving, and also for the dementia related. So in Hovi Care, we are having a lot of let's say tools to train our own caregivers to be ready with that. But of course, it needs to be done in a much bigger way, and more maybe from Australia, transfer of knowledge can be done through that.
Thank you, Ibu Trisna. I really agree with your point that we need to do more socialization, because there is still lack of understanding among our citizens about the need of aged care, and also maybe improve on the aged care training facilities to further develop the market. So thank you very much, Ibu Trisna and Pak Toby for the time. Let me thank Ibu Trisna and Pak Toby on behalf of everyone for sharing their valuable time and expertise with us today. And before we moving to the Q&A session, we will show you some short video as well.
Okay, time for some questions from the audience and participants. And thanks to those who've posted them. Please continue to do so. We'll also try and respond as quickly as we can to cover off as many questions as we have. And the first question's, although, Riyandi,
sorry, Amanda. I think we might forget something, you know. We haven't taken a photo. I forget about it. We haven't taken a photo because in Indonesia, without photo, it doesn't happen, you know. So it's really important. Sometimes it is the main event. So
okay,
let's
so
take
quick group
mandatory
shots.
photo, yes. All right, I'll give cue and we will do 2 times. First, a mandatory formal session, and the second one is more of a freestyle. All right. So, all right, 1, 2, 3. All right, and then next is freestyle. You can do finger pose because election is over right now, so it's safe. All right.
Thanks so much, Riyandi. For those Australians who aren't familiar, the photo op is all important. First question, though, over to Ben. We actually had a question from the audience about the challenges of the skills gap, and Ibu Trisna spoke about the need for training at scale. So, Ben, really keen to hear your thoughts about the challenges of addressing skills gap, recognitions of skills, English language ability, in sending Indonesian workers to Australia, which is obviously an important exchange that's already happening between Australia and Indonesia. Could you talk a little bit more about your collaboration in bringing Indonesian personal care attendants to Australia?
Yeah, so the new visa class, as encouraging as it is, there are hurdles like dealing with any government. And there are a number of requirements. And the first requirement is that a person can demonstrate prior industry experience. That is incredibly hard in a market like Indonesia. Now, if we're having the discussion out of the UK or the States, we could point to some qualifications, some formal education, it would be different. But in Indonesia, that's very hard. There is a second pathway, and that second pathway is if that person has undertaken a certificate 3 in individual support, the new class for aged care, plus that person meets an IELTS English standard of 5.0, plus that person has undertaken 120 hours work experience. Regarding the first issue of working with an RTO, yes, we are in the final stages of resolving that, of working with an RTO based out of Australia who can deliver that certificate 3 online to students here in Indonesia. Our focus will be, our talent pool will be actually from graduate nurses, not because we are suggesting connecting graduate nurses to the Australian market. I think that's a whole other issue, and people from Catalyst know that discussion all too well. But because that's the most obvious and available pool here that we have. So recruiting from diploma and bachelor qualified nurses, matching them up with the RTO in Australia for a delivery of an online course, and then the 120 hours work experience being able to be undertaken at one of the facilities managed by Living Well Seniors Communities. And then very much empowering these young men and women, coaching them, providing them with orientation seminars, providing them with that information about Australia, and then connecting them to various Australian aged care operators for them to take that next step in their career. That's the opportunity, and you know, as I said, we're putting together the final bits of that jigsaw over the next few weeks.
Thanks for that, Ben. I can direct the next question, which was in the Slido, to Toby, perhaps. Again, there's a lot of interest from the audience in the skills and meeting workforce needs. So really interested in hearing your experiences of how in aged care in Australia, the skills gap is being addressed, and how to improve ways of building the workforce that meets the needs of changing demographics in aged care. Is that something, Toby, you can speak to?
Yeah, no, definitely. We actually already source internationally trained aged care workers from the Philippines under the visa scheme, which is in place. And our view actually is quite often people who come from an environment where parents have aged at home and been in generational families, which is more common in Indonesia and the Philippines, actually are very good at caring for older people because it's been a normal part of life. Whereas quite often for Australians, where families don't tend to live together, you don't have necessarily the same skill set. So we actually work with Australian trainers to do training of people internationally already. We also work locally with training organisations to train people. And the number one thing we look for, the training technically is relatively easy to do. A lot of people can do the training, can pass the training. What we look for, though, is people who understand caring and go as far as saying loving the people that we work with, because we want people to be representatives of the families and to care for the people in our aged care facilities like that. So absolutely the training is vital, but we also look very closely at the person, who they are, and that they genuinely care for older people and want to see this as a vocation, that it's part of their lives. If those two are both in place, then absolutely there's a huge opportunity to bring more people in. There is going to be a growing gap in requirements of well over 100,000 people, and a number of those people don't have to be hugely highly qualified. They will need to get qualifications, but those would be achievable for a number of people. And so I think there's an absolutely good opportunity to extend and grow that training pipeline from Indonesia into Australia.
Thanks, Toby. I was just going to flag, Catalyst has actually done some relevant work in this space. So for those that are interested in, particularly in the skills and training, check out the websites. Sondang's dropped a deep dive briefing on aged care opportunities, but also worth checking out Catalyst's work on the comparative assessment of nursing standards in Indonesia and Australia, which is also available on the website. Over to you, Riyandi, for any further questions.
Thank you, Amanda. Next question will be for Ibu Trisna. You have mentioned about social norms. So the question is that how will these social norms will shape our aged care industry in the future? Will we see a change in the near future, or what do you envision with regards to this? And what role do you see for investment from Australia or collaborating with Australian players in providing aged care in the industry in Indonesia, or perhaps also changing this sort of like entrenched norms that has been underway since very long time? Thank you.
Thank you, Riyandi. This is one of the biggest homeworks, at least from what we have experienced here with HVK. That's the biggest homework that need to be tackled, because social norms or stigma, if we can call that, is huge, and that have direct relation with the demand, direct relation with the willing or the family, whether they want to bring their loved one to the facility or not. We have done a lot of seminars, not only about the dementia related things, but also about caregiving for elderly. But of course, we are not able to do that ourselves. It have to be backed up also, and it is already backed up by, let's say, ALZI, the Alzheimer organization in Indonesia. So they have the chapter also in Bali. But that's the thing, very limited resources to tackle these huge homeworks, because then if the understanding of the society is already reaching the level of those countries like Australia, America maybe, and then Japan, where demographically the old population is much higher, then it will be very easy. Any investors related investment need to be done here to ensure that the population of aging is increasing. That will be immediately done. But because of these homeworks, a lot of works need to be done first. I would say it won't take like forever because things are happening. And I'm very happy to see that this kind of webinar is happening. This is the second aged care related webinar that I have participated in, and we need more like this. So it can be something that being talked about more often, and the need is also understood. It's there. The potential, we should not discuss more about that because the potential is huge. But then to bring this understanding for the society that the facility like this is needed is much more urgent. Again, as I mentioned, this is private sector driven, and maybe then it is indeed about time from the government side to do more here in everything which is matters. One of it, for example, is visa. Most of our residents, first of all, will definitely need to be understand or familiar with the regulation here, how to stay with us, for example, at IA-CEPA. At the moment, of course, visa agency helping us out about it, but there's always a lot of changes and all that. But we kept receiving lots of questions, inquiries, not only from Australia, but from many other countries. So it's a work that need to be tackled soon, both from private sectors and the government. If Australian catalysts, Australian government, Australian private sectors can push this more, then I'm sure this huge potential can be realized soon.
Thank you, Ibu Trisna. I mean, I think you've touched on some of the remaining questions, and I should acknowledge there's a number of questions still in the Slido that we won't get to because we're almost out of time. But if I could just put one question back to each of the panelists to respond to, we're really keen to hear what you see as the opportunity for bilateral trade and investment in aged care. And if you had advice to firms, Australian and Indonesian, looking at this sector, what would it be? So maybe, Ben, over to you, the major opportunity you see.
If I can perhaps answer the second part of your question, and I'll be as brief as I can. Often I think Australians come here, they get wowed by statements about, Indonesia, emerging middle class, blah, blah, blah. We then extrapolate a middle class in Australia to be the same as a middle class here in Indonesia. And of course, availability of income levels is something very different. And my advice always is to Australian companies, irrespective of the sector, is to price their services according to the local market, not simply see it's a middle class, see that tagline and then think, wow, whatever we're charging in Australia, we can also charge in Indonesia. Middle class in Indonesia is not the same as middle class in Australia. My second point would be, it is so important to get out of the big cities. Again, I think that's a mistake Australians make all the time. We fly into a big city like Jakarta, we check into a nice hotel downtown in an area like Mega Kuningan, we have a series of meetings, we hand out 1,000 business cards, and then we fly back. I always urge people, again, irrespective of the sector, get on the back of that Gojek, travel out to local kampungs, get out to the regional cities and see how real Indonesia is, and then start pricing a product and adjusting a product accordingly to those needs.
You're making me a bit nostalgic for Jakarta, Ben. I'm jumping on the back of a Gojek. So, Ben, Toby, sorry, over to you for major opportunities this conversation might have brought to mind for you.
I think first then to Ben's point, I think there are opportunities for Australian aged care businesses to partner with Indonesian businesses. And personally, I think partnership is a very logical way to go, where the knowledge of the local market married with the experience of Australia in terms of care standards and quality, I think could be a really good partnership. So I think looking at that is logical. I think secondly, there's room for capital investment in Australia, and there are some exceptionally large funds in Indonesia and exceptionally wealthy business groups who I think are able to invest into the aged care sector in Australia. And there's going to be significant demand for infrastructure in Australia in this space as well. So I think there's opportunity there. And thirdly, I think there's also opportunity in terms of the transfer of skills and bringing people, particularly from Indonesia, into Australia to bring their a workforce, but also to learn and be able to take that back to Indonesia at some point in the future as well. So I think there's a two-way exchange possible there. If those three worked, it would be a great outcome for both countries, I think.
Completely agree. Thanks, Toby, for that summation. Ibu, Trisna, final comments on the major opportunity you see?
I would say I would relate it to the surplus of caregivers here in Bali, because we have got a lot of training centers in the island, and actually the goal is exporting or sending the caregivers well trained to different countries. Most of it actually currently is to Japan. But I think we'll be also cover like Germany and other countries. But opportunities lies there actually for, let's say, Australian company who want to build such facility here in Bali. You have lots of well-trained caregivers. Maybe one thing that need to be improved or transferred is the English proficiency, and also the existing standard of operation as per the Australian quality standard. But you have plenty of Balinese caregivers, well trained, and they have this hospitality already ingrained into DNA of those caregivers. So it is very caring, warm approach and all that. So it is a lot of opportunities when you are looking at the capital. It's that, and I would say we're looking forward to have more and more companies from Australia and other countries like Finland also to contribute into this. So Bali, one of the destination for both tourism and also healthcare, will be having its place on the world platform.
All right, Amanda, I'm afraid the time is up, even though we still have more questions, but unfortunately time doesn't allow. So that's it for today. And please join me to thank all our speakers and my co-host Amanda for their participation in this webinar. And particularly thanks to all of you that has joined us today from Indonesia, from Australia, and from all over the world, and asking important questions to our panelists. And once again, sorry, we do not have a chance to read all the questions. You can always get in touch with us through our social media, to Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and website. Just type it up in the search menu, Catalyst IA-CEPA, to get to know more about the sector and bilateral opportunities in this area, or basically to ask anything related to bilateral trade and investment between Indonesia and Australia. So our next webinar is on Tuesday, May the 14th, focusing on healthcare. Then our third webinar will be in July, where we will discuss early childhood education and care. For more information, please visit again Catalyst website at www.IA-CEPA-catalyst.org. The link to register is in the chat as well. And please share among your networks for anyone that might be interested for the future webinar. As mentioned in the introduction, today's session is being recorded and we will post it in YouTube with a link provided on the Catalyst website. So please look them up and share with others that may be interested. All right. Thank you again and take care and look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.
For Indonesian market, we were going from either nothing to seniors living, and we thought the idea of having these seniors clubhouses operating Monday to Friday, where elderly people can come, gather, meet, make friends in a mentally and physically stimulating environment, we thought that was kind of the appropriate bridge before entering the seniors living markets. For Indonesian market, we were going from either nothing to seniors living, and we thought the idea of having these seniors clubhouses operating Monday to Friday, where elderly people can come, gather, meet, make friends in a mentally and physically stimulating environment, we thought that was kind of the appropriate bridge before entering the seniors living markets. For Indonesian market, we were going from either nothing to seniors living, and we thought the idea of having these seniors clubhouses operating Monday to Friday, where elderly people can come, gather, meet, make friends in a mentally and physically stimulating environment, we thought that was kind of the appropriate bridge before entering the seniors living markets.